A News Central now at this hour begins in Abuja, where the Senate Committee on Finance has commenced a two-day public hearing on the tax reform bills after weeks of debate. The hearing, which gathers input from key stakeholders, aims to shape Nigeria's evolving tax administration framework. The chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance, Senator Sani Musa, confirmed the Red Chamber's readiness to begin deliberations, stating that the committee will consider 2 bills per day during the session. Among the bills under review are the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Fund Bill, the Nigerian Revenue Services Bill, the Nigerian Tax Administration Bill, and the Nigerian Tax Bills. The President of the Nigerian Senate, Godswill Akpabio, is expected to deliver a keynote address and also declare the public hearing open. The President Bola Tinubu, had transmitted the 4 tax reform bills to the National Assembly on October 3rd, 2024, which sparked intense controversy among lawmakers in different parts of the country. Despite the controversy, the bill has scaled second reading, setting the stage for today's public hearing, where stakeholders are expected to make submissions before further legislative action is taken. The reforms are expected to play a key role in the federal government's fiscal policies, with key focus on revenue generation, economic revival, and infrastructural development. The House of Representatives is also scheduled to hold its own public hearing on the bills tomorrow, Tuesday, following their passage for second reading earlier this month. And now joining us to give us a bit of insight is Evans Ofeli. He is a lawyer and tax consultant, and he joins us live from Buffalo in New York, USA. Well, Evans, many thanks for joining us. Let's just get started. What exactly are you expecting to come out of today's public hearing? Let's start there.
Yeah, I'm expecting that by provision of law, public hearing is critical in legislation. And this is the time when the entire public is called upon to make input on the ongoing legislation. Because as of now, it's still a bill. Okay, so Nigerians are expected to go there and, vent all over the world when tax reform are determined, because it's a public legislation. It is important that the public input is injected, or an avenue, an opportunity is given to the public to so make their own input on it. So I expect that there'll be widespread consultation. I mean, especially that the major tax institutions in Nigeria, okay, have been invited. I mean, they are FIRCS and the rest of them, the all institutions that relates to finance in Nigeria are invited, including the CBN governor, the banks, and all financial institutions in Nigeria. Then the general public also have been invited. The senators representing the people all over the country are all present to determine this bill, because when you talk about tax all over the world, people get agitated. The reason people get agitated is because they want to be sure whether this tax bill will determine their survival or not. Especially in the case of Nigeria, where during the campaign, the president had promised to widen the tax net and tax people more. Okay? When the president has said that, even though in the current reform, in the bill, if you look at the details of it, it's not necessarily meant to tax people more. It's just an attempt to ensure compliance, projection, and safeguard the tax itself when it is collected. Because what we have already, this particular bill is going to repeal most of the tax laws that we have before. Okay, I think what we were left with is the petroleum income tax and the VAT and some other taxes. All the company income tax, personal income tax, all those ones are going to go off. These 4 legislations are going to repeal them. And when that is done, in this new reform, there are a lot of provisions that have been made to ensure that the tax evasion will not be the case. And most companies that operate without even registration and they evade tax in the country, just like the Binance case that is going on. This very attempt on this bill is going to eradicate all that. Right. Those companies that operate underground and they evade tax, they don't contribute anything to the country, and they make humongous profit.
All right.
So this bill is going to take care of all those issues.
Right. Well, and let's talk about specifics here, shall we? What unique factors are stakeholders and other Nigerians looking out for, especially in light of the heavy political coloration it has brought along the way?
Well, let me get the question right. I didn't get your question.
I was asking about unique factors that you expect, stakeholders to highlight or bring to the fore. Stakeholders and Nigerians, since it's going to be a public hearing, what do you think the unique factors that is going to come out from today's public hearing, just given how this has gotten very heavy political tint on it?
Yeah, I know there's the issue of regional agitation and tax collection and the rest of that, especially on the VAT, where, there's this heavy argument on alcohol, tax on alcohol that is shared across the country, but a part of the country do not believe in alcohol and whatever it is, but they share from the tax. That is one issue. That one is anchored on the VAT. Which is not actually fully regulated or connected thereto. But the truth is that they must consider equity. There must be a level of national contribution, okay, so as to enhance the formidability and practicability of these bills. Okay, so it's at this level that is considered. And we have seen that the North, actually, they have come to a consensus and they have actually agreed with the totality of it, because one of the governors then and some of the lawmakers then had contended, very seriously about the fact that the peculiarities and the cultural expression of the North must be considered in the tax reform, and that no tax reform should inhibit religious practices and cultural practices of the people. It should be made in such a way. But I think that was just, a coloration of difference. Okay. During the debate, it was fully entrenched and extended. And at the end of the day, they got to understand that even the current tax system that we have, that is even the one that inhibits cultural and religious affair activity. But the current one that is being proposed is much more liberal. Okay, much more liberal, have a widespread capacity to deliver more, and the tendency that they are going to have even compliance in the reform is higher than what it was before. Okay, because this reform was actually copied from the very functional society where tax have made a lot of impact, because economic growth cannot be determined without taxation. Taxation, falls heavily on the issues. When we look at our GDP, how much does tax make up on our GDP? Most countries, tax come as number one before any other resources is considered. Okay, but here, our GDP, our taxation is far flung. It's not even a considerable issue, much so that in the 21st century, where people are downplaying mineral resources and increasing capacity for generation in other areas, we should be looking at those areas. And for those who have the fears that they're going to be taxed more under this dispensation or this reform, they should go and look at the bills one after the other and look at the provisions therein. It's not necessarily so. It's I will commend this government to come up with this, to have come up with this tax reform at this time.
Right, Evans, one has to ask at this point, it's passed through second reading. If this bill eventually gets passed into law, as it looks like it's most likely going to, where will that leave the Nigerian tax landscape? Now, we know that the IMF has, told us severally that our tax contribution to our GDP is quite low and it needs to be increased. It seems that this government is very keen on doing that. Where do you see it leave the Nigerian tax landscape? Very quickly, because we're out of time. We're pressed for time, please.
Well, it really was in a better place, because it's going to create a safeguard for us. Most of the companies that are not really compliant, we by this comply, and individuals and multinationals as well, because it comes with some level of heavy penalty. It comes with some level of it's very meticulous and widespread, so it's going to give us that capacity to determine really what our tax net should be and what should, those who do businesses alike should contribute rightly, to recover, because tax evasion is actually an offense. Okay, so by the time we begin to talk about it and make a lot of legislations rightly so around it, the better for us, because we're not going to rely on natural resources for how long will you do that? I mean, the world is changing. So there is this contributed tax fund that we, leave us in a better place. And a lot of countries have succeeded with this. I mean, we should do that. And corresponsively, the government must also create avenues, and an enabling environment for this company to strive, for individuals to thrive too. Because if you don't have that enabling environment, like as it is today, I mean, the issue should be discussed pari passu. The condition of doing business, okay, the ease of doing business, and the general business environment of the Nigerian state must be discussed and looked into. There must be a reform to that effect too. Tax reform it cannot be done in isolation, otherwise you are going to have non-compliance. But if you do it in a way that you're able to structure the country together with its business environment to create that tax reform, then you are heading somewhere. And I think the government should have that in mind and do same.
All right, well, Evans, we must say thank you, Evans Ofeli, there all the way from Buffalo, New York, from the U.S. to just give us a bit of insight following today's public hearing on the Nigerian tax reform bills. Let's switch from the nation's capital to the southwest, where Lucky Aiyedatiwa has been sworn in as the governor of Ondo State, marking the beginning of his first full 4-year term after succeeding Governor Rotimi Akeredolu, who passed away in 2023. The swearing-in ceremony took place on Monday at the Ondo State Sports Complex in Akure, 2 months after Aiyedatiwa secured victory in the governorship election under the banner of the All Progressives Congress APC. Aiyedatiwa took the oath of office at 12:59 p.m. shortly after his deputy Olaide Adelabmi was sworn in. The governor then rode in an open van around the stadium, waving to cheering supporters. Meanwhile, Ondo State Governor Lucky Aiyedatiwa marked his swearing-in on Monday with an act of clemency, granting freedom to 8 inmates and reducing the sentences of 35 others. Acting on the recommendations of the State Advisory Council on the prerogative of mercy, Aiyedatiwa ordered the immediate release of 8 convicts. He also commuted the death sentences of 15 inmates to prison terms, while 20 others serving life sentences had their jail terms reduced. The governor's chief press secretary, Ebenezer Adeniyan, made the announcement in a statement on Monday. In October 2024, Aiyedatiwa also sworn in 6 new judges to strengthen the state's judicial system. And out to the southwest as we continue to monitor developments in Osun State, where the All Progressives Congress APC in the state has instructed local government chairmen reinstated by the Court of Appeal on 10th of February to resume duties on Monday. In a statement issued on Sunday by the APC's Director of Media and Information, Kola Olabisi, the party dismissed social media reports advising the chairman against returning to office, labeling them as fake news propagated by anti-democratic elements. The APC reaffirmed its commitment to the rule of law and urged security agencies to ensure peace across the local councils. It also cautioned parents to prevent their children from being used as political thugs, emphasizing the need for calm and order in the state. Meanwhile, Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke has directed newly elected local government chairmen to steer clear of council secretariats to prevent unrest. Speaking at their swearing-in on Sunday, Adeleke urged the 30 chairmen and their deputies to focus on community development and uphold the PDP's manifesto. He praised the peaceful electoral process, commended security agencies, and thanked President Bola Tinubu for maintaining stability. The Osun State Independent Electoral Commission declared PDP candidates winners of all 332 councillorship and 30 chairmanship seats. You're watching News Now on News Central Television. Let's go on a short break, but when we return, we're going to tell you about some aggrieved Niger Delta youths who have held a protest in Abuja. Details after this break. Stay with us. And welcome back. Several former Niger Delta agitators have taken to the streets of Abuja, calling on the federal government to beam its searchlight on agencies responsible for the development of the region. The agitators, comprising youths from the Niger Delta extraction, carried several placards with bold inscriptions expressing their displeasure, marched to the National Assembly in Abuja, accusing the presidential amnesty program of not living up to its set-up objectives, and called on President Bola Tinubu to investigate the agency and effect immediate leadership changes.
Interest is to redirect the focus of all activities concerning people of the Niger Delta. They should refocus their activities towards transparency. Let us be exactly aware of all the things that happen in the Niger Delta. People are there in the Niger Delta suffering. As I talk to you, people do not have water to drink. They don't have electricity. They don't live in good homes. But people sit back here in Abuja and squander resources belonging to the people. So this government is committed to accountability, as I told us, and we are believing it. We are believing it. So now we want them to be so committed to the extent of getting people fired from offices where people are not discharging their responsibilities.
We stay with politics. The former governor of Cross River State, Donald Duke, has urged members of the People's Democratic Party to prioritize unity and stability within the party. Speaking at the South-South Zonal Congress in Calabar, Duke emphasized that internal divisions and defections to the ruling All Progressives Congress threatened the PDP's future, but unity could restore its influence. Meanwhile, the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, defended his role in the PDP, or rather in the APC-led government, denying allegations of anti-party activities. Wike accused the PDP of hypocrisy, highlighting similar actions by other party leaders. He insisted that no one could intimidate him and vowed to continue fighting until the right thing is done. The Abia State Governor, Alex Otti, says his administration will not negotiate with individuals who he claims previously contributed to the state's decline. Speaking during church services at the Masters Vessel Church and Power World Ministry International in Umuahia on Sunday, Otti said some of these individuals, now resorting to blackmail and misinformation, had sought negotiations and inclusion in governance but were rejected. According to the governor, his administration upholds integrity and would never engage with criminals. He highlighted efforts to restore a culture of hard work and dignity among citizens, noting that his free and compulsory education policy has effectively and significantly increased student enrollment, placing pressure on existing school facilities. 5 days after an explosion rocked Carlton Channel 1 flow station situated between Boni and Degame local government area in River State, the cause of the explosion is yet to be made public. The NNPCL, in a statement, had explained that there were no casualties recorded, but residents of Iluma Turu, a community in close proximity to the flow station, are saying otherwise. A stakeholder in the community and the immediate past surveillance chairman in charge of Carlton Channel 1 and its environs, Pauline Daniel, is worried that the crude spill is now flowing to the 22 settlements of Iloma, Turu, and its environs. Elsewhere, the Nigerian Army, in collaboration with other security agencies, has dismantled 18 illegal refining sites, arrested 17 suspected oil thefts, and demobilized 10 boats. Troops of the 6th Division also recovered over 25,000 liters of stolen petroleum products across the Niger Delta region. In a statement signed by Acting Deputy Director of Army Public Relations, Lieutenant Colonel Jonah Danjuma, the military confirmed that these achievements were recorded in a series of operations conducted between 17th and the 23rd of February 2025. And according to the statement, troops recorded significant successes in River State, particularly around kilometer 45 and the Idama general area in Akuku Toro local government area, where they destroyed 2 active illegal refining sites and intercepted 3 wooden boats carrying over 9,000 liters of crude oil. The trial of the former governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, on a 19-charge count bordering on alleged fraud and filed by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has commenced in Abuja. The counsel to the EFCC, who had initially informed the court of his intention to present 3 witnesses, was only able to provide 2 following the inability of the 3rd witness to appear in court. A very heavy security presence was noticed at the court as armed EFCC and security operatives with canines were seen manning several positions within and outside the court premises. The court, however, adjourned proceedings to March the 6th and 7th, respectively, for a continuation of trial. Meanwhile, activist and convener of the Take It Back movement, Omoyele Sowore, was also at court. And here's how that moment unfolded.
Good morning, how are you now? Say, who are you shouting? Who is that? Do I look like Yahaya Bello to you? I beg, go and sit down. Go and sit down. Go on. Hey, what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that?
Hello, good day, sir.
Yes.
I'm a police officer. Please
So what?
come out.
I'm not coming out.
Who are you? Can I know you?
I have a business in court.
Okay, please.
No, I'm not coming out. I'm not coming out. You can't clear me. You are not an officer of the court.
Hello, sir.
You are an EFCC officer.
Hello, sir.
You have no business standing in front of the court.
I'm talking to you now.
So
Sir, please.
why is he jumping
sir.
at me?
Hello, good morning, sir.
Yes.
Please, what can I do for
This
you?
is a federal high court.
Yes, you are.
Bring a court official, I'll talk to the person.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm a policeman.
Or you have a senior. How are you? You are not a court official. You are allowed EFCC to be flying at people in court. That's what the nonsense the DSS does here too. It's not taking it easy now. They are the ones who bring us to court. EFCC for that matter. Yes. Huh? There's no issue. I have a court case. Please. Leave the road. Hey, don't touch me. Don't touch me. You can't restrict me. There's no order given to you that can prevent me from going to. You can't. Don't touch me. Don't touch me. No, I'm not going to call everybody to tell you a case I have. No, you have no right. You have no right to prevent me from attending to my case at the Federal High Court. You don't have any right to stay in front of the Federal High Court.
Which case do you have?
Regardless of who you are.
Which case do you have?
I'm not going to tell you my case. You are not my lawyer. You are not my lawyer. Stop your foolishness. You are not my lawyer.
And you're welcome back. More than 7,000 people have been killed in ongoing clashes in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo since January. Congolese Prime Minister Judith Suminwa said the latest death toll at a high-level Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva on Monday, stating that both civilians and combatants were among the casualties. The conflict has been particularly devastating in Goma, where 3,000 deaths have been reported. We also understand that 450,000 people have been displaced after 90 refugee camps were destroyed, leaving them without shelter. Since January, M23 rebel group, which Kinshasa accuses Rwanda of backing, has captured vast areas of eastern Congo, including the strategic cities of Goma and Bukavu, along with valuable mineral-rich territories. This latest escalation underscores the wider struggle for power, identity, and resources in the region as fighting intensifies with no clear resolution in sight. And off to the east of the continent, where Sudan's foreign minister representing the army-aligned government, Ali Yusuf, has declared that the country will not accept any recognition of a parallel government. Yusuf made this statement at a press conference in Cairo, a day after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and a coalition of political and armed groups signed a charter to establish a rival administration in rebel-held areas. This development comes nearly 2 years into a devastating war with the regular army, which has displaced over 12 million people and triggered what United Nations describes the world's most severe hunger and displacement crisis.
لن يحترف أحد بما يسمى بحكومة موازية للحكومة السودانية. هذا موقف واضح ومؤكد، وأكد لنا معالي الوزير. وطبعا نحن في السودان أيضا لا نقبل أن تعترف أي دولة أخرى بما يسمى بحكومة موازية.
السلامة الإقليمية للسودان هو خط أحمر بالنسبة للجانب المصري، ولا يمكن التهاون في هذا الأمر، وبالتالي نحن نرفض أي دعاوى بالتأكيد لتشكيل أي أطر موازية.
Launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a war that has left hundreds of thousands dead, millions displaced, and the world deeply divided. As the conflict drags on, it's not just soldiers and civilians paying the price, but global stability itself. News Central's international correspondent Afia Hagen has more. We will bring you that report in our subsequent bulletin. But in the meantime, I'm joined now by international correspondent Afia Hagen. Afia, if you can hear me, hello to you and good afternoon. I mean, what's the latest from Ukraine on for today? It's the third anniversary of the invasion by Russia. As you rightfully put there, combatants, soldiers, civilians, and even the global stability is on the balance. What's the latest with Ukraine?
Absolutely. Today is the third anniversary of that invasion of the Ukraine by Russian troops. 3 years ago today, they were marching on Kiev. Today, world leaders are actually in Kiev at a conference, and the conference is all about pledging support for Ukraine as it enters the fourth year of this conflict. In attendance at the conference, you had the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the European Union head Ursula von der Leyen, and new sanctions were announced today against Russia by the European Union and by the UK as well. Ursula von der Leyen also pledged more support for the Ukraine to the tune of about €3.5 billion. Justin Trudeau also announced that more armoury will be going to Ukraine from Canada also. Now, in response to all these kind of statements of support of all these world leaders coming together, President Zelensky has said that Ukraine has never had as many friends as they have now. And he also was over the weekend talking about his post, kind of in reaction, I think, to what President Trump said last week, and when he implied that Zelensky was a dictator. He said this weekend, if it means peace for Ukraine, if you really need me to leave my post, I am ready. And he said he would do that in exchange for NATO membership.
And how have world leaders reacted to the anniversary of the invasion?
Well, it's all about support for Ukraine. So like I said, you have that meeting that has taken place in Kiev. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, not in attendance at that meeting, but did give a video link statement from the UK where he pledged further support for Ukraine and talked about, you know, the NHS nurses that are volunteering, and talked about the huge Ukrainian community that is now in the UK because of, you know, the migration of people who, you know, fled the war, essentially. Like I said, Ursula von der Leyen in attendance there pledging support for Ukraine. You had the Polish president there as well, the Albanian prime minister, and also some leaders addressing the fact that the US stance, or we're sort of being told or being guided that the US stance on Ukraine is changing. You know, Donald Trump less than positive about Zelensky, like I said, labeling him a dictator, implying falsely that Ukraine started the war as well. And we know that means as well that they are probably quite less willing to donate as much aid to Ukraine as they've done in the past. Now, under the time of Joe Biden, the US donated about $43 billion worth of aid. And that was really a contentious point, actually, even over the election period, where Trump implied that that aid would be slashed. And now Zelensky is under pressure to take this deal, which would see rare earth minerals from Ukraine be given to US, because the US now is saying that that wasn't aid, and in fact they need to be paid back for the money they have given to the Ukraine. Like I said, Zelensky under pressure to take that deal, and we need to see how that unfolds over the next few days.
And is this war coming to an end? Are we close to an end for this war?
At this point, no, not really, because you need three factors. You need, at the moment, because of these three factors, which are a military stalemate. After 3 years, the war is largely static at the moment. You've got this kind of fatigue, especially from the United States, versus this Russian resolve. And this Russian resolve has been strengthened because of the United States sort of stance that it seems to be siding with Russia, which is the aggressor, and the diplomatic deadlock where we are, where you see Russia and the US having their own talks, and those talks not involving Ukraine or Europe. And there is no way that you can have a peace deal in Ukraine without Ukraine being at the table. And unless you can get past that point, there's no way that a peace deal could happen. So we could be looking at another 6 months, a year, 6 years of war. We just don't know. We do know that President Macron is in Washington today. He will be speaking with President Trump and hoping to put forward the case of Ukraine and indeed Europe, that it needs to have a place at any peace talks to do with Ukraine.
And, well, Afia, many thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate you. Afia Hagen, our international correspondent, giving us a bit of insight there following the third anniversary of Russia's invasion in Ukraine, which is the Russia-Ukraine war. Once again, Afia, many thanks. And we'll switch gears now. We'll continue with more world news. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has pledged 1 billion euros in military aid to Ukraine in 2025. Sanchez made the announcement during a visit to Kiev, where European leaders gathered to mark the third anniversary of Russia's invasion. Reaffirming Spain's unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty, Sanchez stated that only Ukraine could decide its future. The aid package is part of a broader European effort to bolster Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression, and is seen as a significant demonstration of commitment to the country's autonomy and security.
In this regard, I'm proud to announce a new military assistance package for Ukraine worth 1 billion euros in 2025. Three messages. The first one is that Spain is committed to the full sovereignty of Ukraine. All Ukraine can decide its future. And third, we must ensure that Ukraine joins the European Union as soon as we can. Whatever happens in the coming months, Ukrainians' accession to the European Union is the most important victory for the Ukrainian people. Ukraine's hope is in Europe, but Europe's hope is also in Ukraine.
And you're welcome back. And now to business news here. There aren't many ways to make an ordinary, or rather an already difficult situation worse. But imagine emerging from a COVID-19 lockdown only to be thrust into a war between major commodity producers. The conflict disrupts the supply of wheat, oil, gas, fertilizers, and other essentials, sending macroeconomic shocks, rippling across global markets. Prices will soar, supply chains crumble, and inflation sparks, right? Leaving businesses and consumers struggling to adapt. The economic aftershocks are felt worldwide, deepening uncertainty and forcing policymakers to navigate an already fragile recovery. And so, to that effect, we have a guest joining us. His name is Ayodeji Ebo. He's the MD, Chief Business Officer of Optimus by Afri Invest. Ayodeji, Ayodele, I beg your pardon, forgive me. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you for doing this with us, Mr. Ebo. Let's just get started. Stock market's reactions are differently in times of war. It's very different, right? Case in point, the positive response of the market to the invasion of Iraq in March 2003. Then there was good news for global investors. So in 2022, you gave an analysis of the volatility while seeing investors take advantage of the deep with long-term position, assuming it was going to be a short war. How have those trades panned out over the past 3 years?
Okay, thank you. And to say how time flies, these are 3 years. And the initial idea then was that the war wasn't going to last this long. But what we've also seen, if you look back in the last 3 years, so within that period, there was significant shock and most of the asset classes dipped significantly and a lot of long-term investors that took position. So if we look at what has happened by sector, so when you look at most of the defense stocks, the energy and commodity stocks have performed exceptionally well within that space. And you would also note that when you look at the US and the European markets, they've also rebounded significantly. But what we've seen when you look at it from the Russian market, so you see a lot of companies had to take significant write-off, like Nike, the Western well, because of the sanction, a lot of companies that had businesses exposed to Russia, they had to take significant write-off, which impacted on those companies. But over time, so those companies have now began to look at other areas they could spread to, and to rather than concentrating on or concentrating within the Russian economy. So I would say that it wasn't really a very very interesting time. I think 1 year after that, but since then, this is the third year, we're seeing a lot of improvement in those stocks that are within the energy transition space,
right,
within the defense space.
Right. I mean, what would you say, what would you say are, if any, significant long-term, any significant long-term consequences, especially for firms with strong ties to Russia through trade or ownership?
First thing, that the most significant consequence that we have seen is the deglobalization in strategic industries. So you had companies that have strong ties to Russia, whether through ownership or by trade. For most of them had either exited Russia or drastically reduced the operations within that space. So see the European energy firms that they had to write off billions because in Russian assets due to the sanction. But what we've also seen is that the supply chain shifts has accelerated, diversifying across different regions that could also provide that services. They relocated their manufacturing and raw material sourcing to a more politically stable region. Another thing to note is that the war has reinforced a new economic bloc structure where Russia have had to now deepen their ties with the likes of China, India, and the Middle East, while the Western economies, for most of them, have become more self-reliant in critical sectors like energy, defense, and technology. That reliance was very significant. So what we see there is that there will be more shifts against areas that are more politically stable.
Ayodeji Monse, thank you for taking out the time to join us today. Ayodeji Ebo there from Optimus by AfriInvest to give us a bit of insight when it comes to macroeconomics effects of the Russia-Ukraine war on its third anniversary. Thank you once again. Federation, NFF, has set March 5th for the national playoff games of the 2025 President Federation Cup in both the men's and women's categories. This follows a successful completion of the state preliminary across Nigeria. Defending champions Al-Kanemi Warriors, along with Lobby Stars, Bendel Insurance, Enugu Rangers, Shooting Stars, Heartland FC, Aqua United, and Kano Pillars secured victories. However, four-time winners Eyimba FC suffered a shocking loss to Aldiyanem FC via penalties. The draw for the national competition will be held on March 12th, with 64 teams emerging for the round of 64, scheduled for March 19th in Abuja. And that's all we can take at this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of the major stories. The Nigerian Senate has commenced public hearing on tax reform bills. New dawn in Ondo as Lucky Aiyedatiwa is sworn in as state governor. And we also told you that 7,000 persons have been killed in DR Congo since January as conflicts rages on in countries in the country's east. As always, you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, on Star Times channel 274. We're also on Avo TV, and you can stream us live on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith Atibi. Bye for now.